Now let's talk about the state of the Democratic Party, because as we look back over the year, it has been, man, what a fascinating year. I know everybody's distracted by Donald Trump, but I know Mika people would keep saying when I became an independent, they said, well, when are you going to become a Democrat? And that was the recurring question. Mika said, I'm going to get you there. I'm going to get you there. And then I saw the first Democratic debate, and I turned to Mika and I said, and that's why I will never be a Democrat.
Never say never, Joe.
Exactly. Never say never, because that was a lot of Democratic candidates making the mistake of believing that Twitter was the center of Democratic politics. We have seen over the past 6 months, I think, just for me, being fascinated and loving American politics as I do, one of the fascinating stories is what's quietly happened, where working class Americans, white and black, have said, wait a second, I don't watch cable news every night. I'm not on Twitter. I am the Democratic Party. I'm going to tell you where our party's going to go. You're not going to tell me. And some fascinating things have happened over the past few months, haven't they, Jonathan?
Absolutely. And, you know, the Democratic Party is not really riven by this great strife. I think sometimes Republicans want to make it seem as if, you know, this is 1968, where you have, you know, the anti-war Gene McCarthy people against Hubert Humphrey and Lyndon Johnson. It's just been temporarily in the possession, or part of the party has been temporarily in the possession, in custody of what you might call the woke police. You know, these folks on Twitter who are trying to enforce a particular kind of progressivism. Look, Joe Biden considers himself rightly to be a progressive, to be in that great progressive tradition, but there is a kind of a fringe element that applies loyalty tests, purity tests, as Pete Buttigieg called them, that got the party off onto the wrong footing earlier this year. And I think a lot of Democrats, the balance of power in the Democratic Party was very, very upset about that, because the stakes are so high. And we can't experiment this time with who the Democratic nominee is. We have to have somebody who can win. So nowadays, everybody's a pundit, Joe. And all of those millions of pundits who also call themselves Democrats are going, we got to get somebody who's a little bit more moderate, who can make sure to beat Donald Trump.
Well, especially since we've narrowed our presidential elections down to a handful of states in the industrial Midwest.
That's right.
It just is certain candidates fit those states, whether it's Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, better than others. And of course, Florida is fascinating. Well, and you're right, Jonathan, you know, the famous quote that nothing focuses the mind like a hanging at dawn could apply here, where nothing focuses the Democratic mind more than a second term of Donald Trump. I think this is a party that is going to be unified coming out of the convention, regardless of
I think that's absolutely
Karine,
right.
Yeah. Karine, would you agree with that?
I agree with you 100%. You know, at the end of the day, the voters are going to decide who the nominee is going to be. We're not going to decide that. Each candidate has to go out there and make their case. I mean, that's just the fact there. But I agree with you 100% about what's going to happen after the Democratic convention. There is going to be unification. And this is why. I say this is just looking at what has happened the last 3 years, the electoral process, how Democrats have come out, how Democrats have done things that have been impossible, winning in very red districts and red states. But I have to tell you too, Joe, there is a vulnerable community out there people are just afraid. They're fearful of another 4 years of Donald Trump. I think that's why you've been seeing these types of unusual wins. I think that's why you've been seeing this type of energy, because they know what could possibly happen if Donald Trump gets reelected. Hence, to your point about there will be unification after whoever's the nominee. I think people will get behind that person, but whoever the nominee is has to continue to do that work to get people out in November of next year.
And if you are a Democrat and you are fearful, or a Republican, and you're fearful about the future, register to vote.
Yeah.
Make sure your neighbors are registered. Knock on doors. Start asking around right now about phone banks. Start asking around about how you can help local organizations. Get out the vote. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.